October 15th, 2025, Ottawa, 89th minute. Canada are one goal down to Honduras in a must-win final CONCACAF qualifier. And their goalkeeper Marcus Doyle is already sprinting toward the opposition half. Not because the coach told him to, because if he doesn't, Canada miss another World Cup. On home soil, again. Then a 22-year-old named Liam Osei, released by the Canadian Youth Academy at age 15, picks up the ball 30 yards from goal. Nobody in that stadium of 44,000 people breathes, and what he does next changes everything. But here is what nobody was talking about the morning of that game. Canada had never, not once in their football history, won a knockout match at a major international tournament. Not in 1986, the only World Cup they'd ever reached before. Not in any Gold Cup final. Not in any continental semifinal. They were a country that kept arriving at the door and never walking through it. Their coach, a 54-year-old Hungarian-Canadian named Stefan Kovacs, had told his players something in the hotel that morning that the press never heard. We'll come back to that, because it explains everything that happened next. To understand what 2026 meant, you have to go back. Not to 2022, though that story matters. Back to 1986. Azteca Stadium, Canada's only World Cup. 3 games, 3 losses, 0 goals scored. The squad flew home to a country that barely noticed they'd left. No parade, no broadcast special. The captain of that team, a midfielder named Paul Dolan, gave one interview to a regional newspaper in Vancouver and said something that stuck. We weren't ready. Maybe the country wasn't ready either. That quote sat in an archive for 40 years. Stefan Kovacs found it. He printed it out. He pinned it to the wall of the Canadian dressing room in Toronto in January 2025. Underneath it, he wrote 3 words in red marker. Are we ready? Stefan Kovacs was not the Federation's first choice, or their second. He was the man they called after 2 higher-profile coaches turned the job down. He'd spent 11 years coaching in the Hungarian second division, then 4 years with a Belgian club side that was relegated in his final season. On paper, he was a nobody. But Kovacs had one obsession that nobody else in Canadian football had. He believed that Canada's geographical identity, vast, multicultural, underestimated, was not a liability. It was a weapon. He went to 8 different cities in his first month. He watched trials in community parks in Brampton, in indoor facilities in Laval, in a crumbling stadium in Victoria, where the changing rooms had no hot water. He found 14 players in those trials who had never received a senior call-up. One of them was Liam Osei. Liam Osei, his mother is Ghanaian. His father is from Nova Scotia. He grew up in Mississauga, sleeping on the same bunk bed as his younger brother, watching Premier League matches on a cracked tablet screen at 2 in the morning. At 15, the Canadian Youth Academy told him he was not physically developed enough and released him. He spent 3 years playing in a regional Ontario league, $40 per game, traveling by bus, carrying his own kit. At 18, he signed for a semi-professional club in Hamilton. At 20, a second division Belgian side took a chance on him. At 22, Stefan Kovacs called him into camp for the first time. The first thing Liam said when he walked into that dressing room, and this was confirmed by 3 teammates, was, "I wasn't supposed to be here." Kovacs looked at him and said, "Neither was I. That's exactly why we will win." Now hold that thought, because there is something about that moment in Ottawa, the 89th minute, the ball at Osei's feet, that even Kovacs couldn't have scripted. The CONCACAF qualifying campaign was not clean. It was brutal. Canada lost their opening qualifier to Mexico, 2-0 in a hostile atmosphere in Guadalajara, a game where their goalkeeper made 11 saves and still couldn't keep them in it. They drew 1-1 with Costa Rica in a match they dominated for 60 minutes and then conceded from a set piece in the 78th. They beat Jamaica 3-0, which felt like progress, until the Federation announced that 3 first-choice players were injured for the next 2 games. Kovacs didn't panic publicly, but one of his assistant coaches later described a training session in September 2025 where Kovacs pulled the squad together and told them the bluntest thing he'd ever said to a group of players. 7 of you are playing for a World Cup spot. The other 7 are playing for your careers. Figure out which one matters more to you and become the other one." The room went silent. Then Osei started clapping, slowly, and one by one, every player in that room joined him. The night before the Honduras qualifier, the must-win, the one that would determine everything, 3 Canadian players couldn't sleep. We know this because one of them, a 30-year-old center back named Tomas Ferreira, wrote about it afterward. He said he lay on his hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, and called his father in São Paulo. The man who had sacrificed a decade of wages to pay for Tomas's football development, who had never once seen his son play in person because he couldn't afford the flights. Tomas told him, "Papa, tomorrow I play for you." His father cried. Tomas cried. Then Tomas hung up the phone, laced his training shoes, and ran the hotel corridor for 45 minutes at 2 a.m. until he was calm. That is what a World Cup means, not a stat, not a ranking. A father on the phone at 2 a.m. who has never seen his son play. And then the match. Ottawa. 44th hour and 482 people packed into a stadium that had been built for athletics. Red and white scarves, drums, a noise that veterans of the ground said was unlike anything they had heard there before. Honduras were organized, physical, and dangerous on the counter. Canada controlled possession but couldn't convert, hitting the crossbar twice in the first half, once through Osei, once through a driven effort from midfielder Carlos Ibanez that bent around the wall and kissed the post. Then in the 61st minute, a defensive error, a misplaced pass. Honduras broke 2-on-1 and buried it. 1-0. The crowd went quiet. Not silent, a different kind of noise. A held breath, an old familiar dread. Because Canadian football fans had been here before. Many times. And they knew how this story ended. At 80 or 89th minute, Kovacs has thrown on every substitute. The goalkeeper, Marcus Doyle, 27 years old, 6'4", son of a Jamaican-Canadian bus driver from Toronto, is in the opposition half for a corner. The corner is cleared. The ball falls to Osei at the edge of the area. One touch to control, one look up, and then a curling, low-driven shot that moves late, that the goalkeeper gets one hand to, that hits the inside of the post and goes in. Ottawa erupts. The noise is physical. It moves through you. Players are on the ground. Kovacs is on his knees on the touchline. And Liam Osei, the boy who was told at 15 that he wasn't good enough, runs to the corner flag, drops to his knees, and presses both palms flat into the grass. Like he's thanking the ground itself. Like the ground owes him something. It does. Canada qualified. They won the subsequent playoff. They came to World Cup 2026, hosted jointly across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, as one of the tournament's lowest-ranked sides. FIFA's pre-tournament projection gave them a 4% chance of reaching the knockout rounds. Journalists described them as the hosts who are just happy to be there. Stefan Kovacs read every one of those articles. He collected them. He stacked them in a folder that he left, deliberately, visibly, in the center of the dressing room table before every match. He never said a word about the folder. He never had to. The players read it themselves. And here is what Stefan Kovacs told his players that morning in the Ottawa hotel. "The thing I told you we'd come back to." He gathered them in a conference room at 7 a.m. No tactical board, no video, just the squad sitting in a circle. And he told them about a conversation he'd had with his own father when he was 8 years old. Growing up in Budapest, watching football on a small black and white television. His father had said, "Stefan, in football, in life, there are two kinds of people. Those who accept what they are told they are, and those who decide for themselves." He paused, then Kovacs said, "We are the second kind. Every single one of us was told what we were. Today we decide something different." That is the sentence that traveled with Canada through everything that followed. World Cup 2026 on home soil, a country that waited 40 years, a coach nobody wanted, a striker told he wasn't good enough at 15, and a folder full of newspaper articles that said they had no chance. The story isn't finished, it's just getting started. If this hits you, unsubscribe. Every week we find the football story nobody else is telling. Stoppage Time. Football's greatest stories.